Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of RTM's Track Talk. I'm Ailsa Cowen, your host for today, and for this episode I'm joined by David Rowe, Head of Strategy at Network Rail in the recently established Technical Authority. His focus for today's episode is Network Rail's research and development portfolio. Thank you for joining us today, David. I can see from my research that I've done you've had a long career in transport. When did you make the transition over to rail and why?
So I suppose it's probably worth saying that I've always been attracted by innovation. I just love working on stuff that's sort of creative and inspiring. And quite frankly, I really don't like doing the same thing twice or anything the same way twice. So I actually found myself doing quite a lot of innovation, although I didn't really realise that was what I was doing in my early career, which kind of was in transport really, because I was sort of working in the engineering consultancy supply chain for about 10 years. And then, I don't know, I suppose innovation for me is very quickly became not just about products or stuff, that it's really about people. So from the engineering supply chain, I went and got a job at the University of Bath's Management School, and that was really all about transferring lean techniques from the automotive sector into construction. So for me, a lot of innovation success is really about the culture that we create, and I very much found that in just looking at transferring lean into construction, and that kind of led me to join Highways England, which has really got me into sort of working for a roads client, and I've been putting a lot of thought and work into procurement, and I really went to Highways England to focus on helping to develop and implement new procurement strategies, which for me, procurement can sound a bit dull, a bit transactional, but for me it's all about setting an environment which helps people innovate. That's one of the key things it must do. And then moving from Highways England, I went into DFT, still working in roads. So I still haven't actually answered your question yet. What made me shift to rail? I spent 2 to 3 years in DFT overseeing the network operations part of Highways England in a new team that had been set up. And then I had this very interesting, just a few yards away across the floor was this sort of team working in rail passenger franchising. And I just thought, that sounds really interesting. And actually, all of the stuff I've been thinking about and developing around procurement in highways, all of that must surely be relevant for rail. So eventually I managed to kind of walk about 10 yards and get a job in that team. And what an experience that was, working in rail passenger franchising.
Yeah, I can imagine that's quite the changeover, because the problems with rail and the problems with rail compared to road, I can imagine it feels like a totally different world to be exposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because there's, I guess, with roads, you're sort of a little bit distanced in that, people are kind of responsible for getting around in their own vehicles. You're just providing a bit of infrastructure, really. And obviously, it's a lot more than that with a public transport system, isn't it? You just seem to be responsible for everything. Rail has for a very long time been a very, very kind of political environment. So absolutely fascinating.
Going off your career in rail, can you explain what the Network Rail research and development portfolio is and what it aims to achieve?
Yeah, so after spending a couple of years in DFT in franchising, I went to join Network Rail, and to be honest, I've been in Network Rail about nearly 8 years now, and the whole time has really been involved in research, development, and innovation. So it's great to sort of see now that we've got our R&D portfolio is about investing nearly £250 million of sort of money directly from Network Rail that comes through our sort of 5-year determination, and it sort of doing more than we could otherwise do with that by tying it together with a load of third-party funding. So this nearly £250 million plus third-party funding is all about improving Network Rail's infrastructure and really kind of building a very strong ratio of benefits to costs from a whole range of projects. And it really kind of covers everything that Network Rail does. So that's That, of course, starts with passenger and freight users, and it's about getting really good value for funders. But it also covers areas like safety, security, and reliability, and actually increasingly areas like environmental sustainability, including decarbonisation, which is really sort of taking off, isn't it, in terms of its importance?
It certainly is. So, with regards to sort of new technology like decarbonisation, how important is new technology to the rail industry, would you say?
It's absolutely crucial for every industry, I'd say, and rail is just no different. I mean, I think it's interesting, isn't it, that actually, of course, the rail industry is built on new technology. And I know for some people this is going to seem sort of a really, really obvious thing, perhaps, to say, but essentially the railway's kind of built on opportunities from the first industrial revolution, isn't it? At the end of the day, the Rainhill trials in 1829, finding the best source at the time of moving, using a sort of moving steam engine to sort of pull wagons along, as a competition, and to find out and test the limits of what current technology could do then. And actually, that's exactly what we're trying to kind of recreate now. So we're kind of in the midst of what some people refer to as the fourth industrial revolution, which is about convergence, massive convergence of technologies, lots of technologies being transferred from one sector to another. So it's incredibly important, and I think at the heart of that we've got technology developments, not just in one or two areas, but we've got huge developments in materials, in automation and robotics, all kind of driven by massive amounts of data that, if we get connected, can add a huge amount of value. And of course, all the opportunities around new and exciting energy systems and sources.
So, talking of new opportunities, what is the opportunity from the research and development portfolio for passengers and freight users?
Well, there's masses and masses. It's a really tough question, that. There's so many things that we're doing. It's really hard to know where to start. I think a really good place to start is probably by saying that actually it's really about helping passengers and freight users get what they want from the railway. It gives what you might call voice and choice. So if I just pick out a couple of very, very passenger focused examples of things that we're sort of picking up in the R&D portfolio. So one of the things we're developing is a passenger assist app, which is great in terms of actually giving voice, if you like, and sort of personalisation to people that need quite a bit more help in terms of using rail services. Then sort of moving into the choices that we're able to provide. Well, one of my colleagues has been doing a lot of work in developing sort of condition monitoring data to be available around lifts and escalators. And that does a whole range of things, from enabling us as an infrastructure manager with our suppliers to actually make those facilities more available, but also being able to put that data into a domain where it can be used by app developers, and then provide availability information onto passengers so they can actually start making more informed choices about how they use the railway. So I think there's a really good couple of examples there. I mean, both those things are still in development. You should, and your listeners should, see more about those in the media fairly shortly. And actually, I think, just to plug your own magazine, Ailsa, I think you've got an article, a feature on lifts and escalators, either that's come out very recently or is going to come out very shortly.
We have indeed. So you've just spoken about how passengers and freight users can get involved and what opportunities are presented to them by the R&D portfolio, but is the research and development programme something businesses can get involved in? And if so, why should they?
So yeah, very much so. Essentially, we've put the R&D portfolio in place to drive and support innovation in the supply chain. So we know that there's a lot of innovation that is going on in the supply chain anyway. But the portfolio is about bringing out the best in that, and providing support to help de-risk some innovation where that's important. So there's a whole bunch of things we put in place to try and achieve that. So we're working very closely with partners, including Innovate UK and the catapults, in particular the Connected Places catapult. So, in terms of how businesses can get involved, we've already launched quite a few open competitions in the first year of CP6. So that's in the last financial year. We've done things like develop new models for procurement, and most recently we've applied a new model called a design contest to innovate solutions at Manchester Piccadilly Station, for example. So I think that that's proved very exciting. I think we've had a huge number of businesses showing an interest in that and putting in applications. So that's been very successful. If I can go on a little bit more, I think it's not just about businesses working in their own right. Of course, businesses sort of work in partnership with each other, but also in partnership with the academic sector as well. So one of the things we've been able to do by having the portfolio is commit to investing £10 million through a set of agreements that we signed, or Andrew Haynes, our chief executive, signed in September last year. And that is great in terms of helping connect the sort of earlier stage ideas and innovation that exists in the academic sector with businesses. And I could go on and on. There's a whole bunch of investment that the government's making with DFT's first of a kind competition, for example, which again some of your listeners may well be aware of, and may well even have put bids in.
Yeah, we published a story about the first of a kind competition today on our website.
That's great, and that's something that we've been able to support. So although that's kind of about funded through DFT's grants, I mean, of course, one of the things that businesses need is sponsorship from client organisations like Network Rail. So one of the things the R&D portfolio has allowed us to do is to provide a more kind of coherent connection, if you like, between some of those businesses that are looking for that sponsorship and sponsors around the business.
So, David, it certainly sounds like you've seen the industry change and develop and innovate a lot since you started in the rail industry. Have you seen a lot of changes in the industry since you joined, and what are the most exciting developments in the industry right now, would you say?
Well, I mean, if I go back to, I mean, in some ways, I don't like talking about money, but actually, funding at the end of the day is tremendously important, isn't it? And I think I mentioned earlier, I've been with Network Rail 8 years now, and when I joined its sort of fledgling R&D team, there was about 5 of us with no dedicated funds. And now we've got a 300, including the third-party funding, we've got a portfolio with funding over £350 million, and we've got a sort of primary stake in £700 million worth of European research in something called the Shift to Rail programme. So, I mean, that's that's over £1 billion worth of R&D one way or another. So for me, that's, in just pure numbers terms, that is a huge change. But of course, it's not to say that innovation wasn't happening, but it's really about how it's kind of joined together. So that there's loads of great stuff going on, of course, but it's it was more down to sort of Herculean efforts of individuals that were maybe trying to work a bit against the odds. And it's definitely, I think the point I really want to make was that for me, innovation and the role of research and development is definitely mainstream now, rather than being a sort of an interesting sideline. So, and I think that kind of comes back to your point around, or your question around sort of what's in it for businesses, really. So, I mean, the other thing you were asking about was what's really exciting in terms of what's going on. And again, we could do a whole piece, a whole podcast just on maybe even just one of these areas. But I mean, I guess something that hits the news pretty often now, sometimes in a bit of a negative way around jobs and so on, but actually has a huge amount to offer, I think, in terms of making, not only better services for passengers and freight users or whatever, but actually making a lot of our colleagues' lives a lot easier and, most importantly, safer, is sort of artificial intelligence and robotics. And it all kind of maybe sounds a bit sci-fi, but there's a huge number of applications already around artificial intelligence already across a lot of organisations that are working in rail. And with us, for example, I mean, the huge amounts of data that we pick up from sending our sort of measurement equipment around the tracks, it has to be, it can't all be looked at by human beings. There's a huge amount of interpretation that needs to go on by machine in order that we concentrate our engineers' efforts into that most value-adding stage at the end, where in terms of making decisions and deciding when we need to intervene and when we don't.
David, you sound very, very passionate when you talk about all the different projects and all the different innovations that you're involved in. So is there a particular project you've worked on you are the most proudest of, or that you've enjoyed working on the most?
There's so many absolutely brilliant examples of product development that have gone on. I mean, we've got I don't know, probably approaching 200 of them in the R&D portfolio at the moment. So I think rather than pick one of those, for me, the thing that kind of drives our ability to innovate, and it kind of comes back to something I was mentioning earlier, and my sort of experience working in Highways England and thinking about lean and stuff like that, is that it's about it. For me, it's all about creating opportunities for people and kind of getting everyone involved in innovation, collaboration and learning. So that's a very long-winded introduction to giving you a couple of examples. So I apologise for that. But my first one was when I was working at DFT. I found myself given an amazing opportunity, I thought, sort of working with other colleagues in the department around sort of franchise development and policy development and franchise management, the Association of Train Operating Companies, as it was at the time, the ORR, and actually colleagues in Network Rail and train operators to look at how we could improve stations by essentially by changing franchising policy and all the kind of stuff around it. And I think that was really interesting. And why I picked this one was because that whole project, it wasn't about a product or a technology. It was about changing the roles that each of those players had to really kind of focus them on what they do best. I can't pretend it wasn't a really tough process. There was, at the end of the day, change is always difficult, I think. Whether it's actually a good change or in a lot of people's view, not such a good change. But for me, the reason I was particularly proud of that work was that we managed to go from an idea to actually the first implementation of that new set of roles in a franchise. So it's quite I think quite a big achievement in just 18 months, which for me was really, really good. And actually, I suppose at the end of the day as well, how interesting, you're working in a government department, you've changed a bit of policy. So what, off the back of that, the first franchise we put it in, which was a short extension to the Greater Anglia franchise, it actually did achieve some quite significant cost savings. And the passenger satisfaction scores went up. I'm sure not entirely due to that one policy initiative, but it was definitely cited as a significant part of that. So for me, that was all about bringing together a group of people and getting them to play different roles that allowed them all to kind of do what they were really, really good at. So I think the other thing is, for me, that is just so important is really engaging young people in the rail sector. We can be a bit guilty of setting up hierarchies that don't necessarily give much of a voice and much input to young people. So there's a couple of things I've done. A couple of years ago, I was heavily involved in a sporting group of sixth formers in a sort of 48-hour apprentice style challenge. And these young ladies and men were sort of 17 years old, and their behaviours, their ability to just take a strategy document with a bit of face-to-face briefing and turn that into interpreting the challenge that was there, setting up their own work streams, delivering outputs, financial planning, even developing a kind of proof of concept as an app, which just just blew our minds away. And then not only doing that, but actually presenting it to quite a scary panel of senior colleagues, not just from Network Rail, but also train operator and a couple of other organisations, and sort of taking questions from them and just being really confident and so credible throughout. It was just absolutely awesome. I just think there's so much more that we could do around that. I mean, we have actually got that said. Actually, in Network Rail, our chief executive Andrew Haynes is sponsoring an initiative for our graduate engineers and apprentices called DICE, which is a brilliant way of giving opportunity to young people to really get engaged. I think it would be great to see a lot more of that across the whole industry. What do you think?
I definitely agree. Our last podcast guest, Adeline Jin, who spoke about, who's the founder and chair of Women in Rail, she spoke a lot about getting not just women in the industry, but also a greater range of ages in the industry as well. So getting more people to engage with roles in not just Network Rail, but just the industry in general.
Yeah. I think it's so important, isn't it? And I think, going back to the sixth formers, I think one of the things that the kind of initial thought was that, we'll just pick the ones that are interested in kind of STEM subjects. And we thought, well, no, that's exactly the wrong thing to do, because actually, if we really are going to build an industry that does genuinely reflect everyone and everyone's interests and way of thinking and what matters to people, it's got to involve everyone, hasn't it? So we got people that were doing humanities A levels and so on, and it was amazing because of course not only did you get a fantastic, not only did we have the little team that was capable of developing an app, we had a couple of people that were interested in potentially becoming accountants or whatever, but we also had people that were absolutely phenomenal, especially for their age, at marketing. And that's, so important, isn't it, in terms of really kind of understanding all those different dimensions of what providing great services is all about.
So I'm going to have to ask you the unavoidable question and the thing you can't avoid at the moment.
I wouldn't let that
how has COVID-19 impacted your work, and what do you think it will mean for the future?
We were asking earlier about changes I'd seen in my time in rail. So I think on a sort of slightly light note, one of the things some things are really tough to change, and one of those things I think in rail is that we are definitely in our element when we're responding to a crisis. Now, sometimes that can cause maybe a few challenges, that we don't necessarily always put as much effort into looking into the future as we might want to do. But actually, COVID's a brilliant example of an opportunity, or a challenge, if you like, that's really played to our strengths. I've just seen so many examples of innovation happening at just the most phenomenal pace. So, I think we, as an industry, we managed to keep trains moving, didn't we? And I think, although obviously it has hit the industry, we seem to be doing pretty well in terms of getting back on our feet, maybe compared to some other sector, well, certainly some other sectors, but maybe even compared to some other parts of the construction sector. So, and just lots of great sort of urgent examples of, whether it was developing new forms of PPE, sourcing new, sort of new supply chain opportunities. We've done things like thermal screening and thermal imaging to screen employees, as I know a number of other organisations have had, for example. So lots and lots of examples. And not only have we done that, but we've also managed to find time to kind of help others. So we've made quite a big contribution in terms of helping the NHS. Again, as I know, lots of others have done, but we've, it's really, I think, brought out the best in us. And of course, that means it's really crucial to build on that, isn't it? So, the second part of your question about, well, what will it mean for the future? I think it creates quite a powerful, new baseline, if you like, in which to move forward. So, the Construction Leadership Council, for example, has come out with this strap line of restart, reset, and reinvent, which personally I really like. It's actually been picked up by a collaboration initiative that, again, you may know about, called I3P. And I just think that's fantastic. It's certainly forcing us in Network Rail, as it is doing, of course, across the whole sector, to review priorities. But going right back to the sort of initial question that you raised about what the R&D portfolio is and why we've kind of got it, it's really about having that ability to pivot, to change what you're doing quickly. It's about kind of being able to shift the balance of what you're doing. So it's not about an either or. It's about saying, well, actually, all the challenges before COVID haven't gone away. We've still got to address those. But actually, we've got to. There are other things that we need to attend to now. And having that portfolio is already, we're seeing, allowing us to be pretty light on our feet in terms of shifting what what projects we're picking up and what we're moving forward and how quickly we're managing to do that.
Well, my next question was going to be, how do you think the rail industry can recover from the outbreak, and where do you think the focus should be? But I feel like you've kind of already started to hint on it, but feel free to expand if you'd like.
Yeah. Well, I can keep it brief because I appreciate I can go on about it. It's the problem with being passionate about stuff, isn't it? Well, so for me, I don't know. Lots of different ways of answering this, but maybe just 3 words, and that's innovation at pace. I think for me, getting. If we're going to innovate at scale, which quite frankly we've got to do, we're going on this journey of turning research, development, innovation into a relatively niche activity, into something that is just really business as usual. And if we're going to get everybody involved, it's got to kind of happen quite quickly. So that pace is incredibly important. That focus for us about everybody being involved, we've been using for a while now a hashtag Pioneers Welcome, which kind of, it picks up on that sort of very early sort of theme I mentioned about, with the first industrial revolution and those sort of pioneers from that era. But I just feel that seeing ourselves as pioneering, and that being really, really important in terms of creating something new, different, better is really important. And that's about helping to build a different world. I think recovery from COVID is about not clinging on too much to the old world and just enjoying the journey into a sort of slightly different world, with loads of benefits that are going to come from that. And we've already seen some of those with, locally, I guess, I don't know about your area, but certainly around where we are, things like air quality and noise from traffic and all the rest of it. It was just brilliant, losing a bit of that and seeing what a different sort of life could be like.
So speaking of collaboration, you're currently working with the Railway Industry Association's Unlocking Innovation programme. Can you tell me a little bit more about what this is, and if businesses would like to, how they could get involved with it?
Yeah, sure. So the Rowe Industry Association, they put on a wide range of events for industry, as I'm sure a lot of people already be aware of. The Unlocking Innovation programme is sort of one. It's a series of events, but it's kind of a bit more than that, really. But it's very much kind of focused on the sort of where next. So a lot of RIA's work is about sort of supporting businesses and sort of engaging with the now. But of course, actually, the ability to unlock innovation is the new now. I suppose that's what I'm saying about making innovation as business as usual. So the events that are running, they've gone online now. They've had to, like so many other events, and they tried out a new format actually recently as part of the Leeds Digital Festival. So they ran 5 one-hour webinars as part of that festival, and that, I think that was absolutely brilliant. It did a whole load of things. It was kind of a bit brave, I think, in trying out a very different format. Got very, very good level of participation. The level of participation in all the webinars was kind of in the hundreds. We want to involve tech developers in railway in a big way, not just at the margin. So that was a fantastic example. They run them around all sorts of themes. They particularly focus on the themes I mentioned earlier around things like materials, autonomy, data and energy. The easiest way to find out what's going on around unlocking innovation is by visiting RIA's website. And it's probably also worth saying, actually, if you're worried about budgets and stuff, I appreciate everyone's tightening their belts at the moment, then they are free to attend.
Thank you very much for joining me today, David, for this episode of RTM's Track Talk. It's been great to hear about all the work you're doing with Network Rail's research and development programme, and it's great to hear someone who's so passionate about everything that they do as well.
Great, it has been fabulous to chat to you. Thanks, Ailsa, lovely to meet you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of RTM's Track Talk. Stay tuned for our next episode coming soon, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you've enjoyed listening.